Welcome back to Electrolysis Unplugged. Today's episode is built around a listener question that highlights one of the most misunderstood and emotionally charged topics in hair removal, paradoxical hypertrichosis. This is something that comes up constantly in consultations, professional discussions, and online spaces. And it's what makes it particularly challenging is that most people have heard parts of the explanation, but rarely the whole story. When fragmented information gets repeated often enough, it sounds like established fact instead of working clinical understanding. Our goal today is to slow this conversation down and walk through what's actually happening beneath the skin and why this topic causes so much confusion in the first place.
And I want to start by saying that this is a very good question. The listener even mentioned that they remembered me commenting on this topic not too long ago, but they weren't sure if they were remembering it correctly. That tells me two things. First, this topic sticks with people, and second, quick explanations aren't enough. Paradoxical hypertrichosis sits at the intersection of follicle biology, hormones, and modality limitations. If you oversimplify any of these pieces, the entire explanation falls flat.
Hi,
Hello, everyone.
So I realized last week that, and I know you guys already got the email, that I done messed up. I did not realize I didn't unlock the class. And so I did my whole interview with Barbara all by myself, waiting for everybody to show up. And I was like, they've never no-showed.
She's like, nobody loves me. And I'm like, Stephanie, did you undraft the thing? She's like, no.
I did not. I have do not disturb on because I was doing an interview, right, guys? Like I'm here to make sure I'm there. Sorry. Just remember, I'm cute. That's what matters at this moment. So as we get everybody locked in, and ready to go, we have a listener question this week that kind of gave us a good long opportunity to talk about this because it's something that gets hit over and over again. So
That's right. So let me read the question exactly how it came in because the wording here matters.
Yep.
So it was about paradoxical hypertrichosis. And the listener went, is this correct? Paradoxical hypertrichosis can only happen on the face and only if someone already has peach fuzz, right? Laser will activate the peach fuzz into more terminal hair. So there's really three assumptions that are embedded here. Well, one is location, talking specifically about only being on the face. The hair type, peach fuzz to terminal. And then the mechanism, right, via laser hair removal. So all of these really need to be unpacked here. The short answer, though, is no, and not exactly. So let's kind of get into what the long answer might look like. Because when we explain this directly, it affects consultation, it affects consent, and it definitely affects treatment planning.
Oh, yeah. So as someone that gets this question a lot because I do both, right? Let's start with the biggest problem here, which it starts with the language in this spot. Because terms like peach fuzz, they sound super harmless. I mean, like it's peach fuzz, right? And they're being used to describe living follicles. These living follicles have blood supply. They still exist within like a hormonal environment often in these species. They're still capable of responding to stimulus. So when we treat that hair as irrelevant or risk-free, it's just peach fuzz. The misunderstanding begins there, and it's definitely not with the laser itself, but how we conceptualize hair biology in general. So
this is also why I'm not a huge fan of dermaplaning, by the way.
Oh, I hate dermaplaning.
Because people do that thinking that peach fuzz is just, like that dead layer of skin, really.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, welcome to shaving your entire face for the rest of your life until you want to let it go. And that's the thing is like, I'm in aesthetic school right now because apparently I didn't have enough after my name. But it's one of those things that like, I dread the moments that I have to like wax somebody or dermaplane somebody because I'm like, I already know what this does when it goes wrong, right? So paradoxical hypertrichosis is defined as an unexpected increase in hair growth following laser hair removal in an area where reduction was expected. That increase can appear as thicker, darker hair, okay, or broader distribution of hair. What it doesn't mean is that laser created new follicles. We've talked about this in past mentorship hours and the podcast, that humans are born with all the follicles they will ever have. What changes is the follicle behavior and not the follicle count, okay? And that distinction is very critical in this space because it shifts the conversation away from that fear-based explanation of the laser made this happen towards a biological reality.
It's also important to say that paradoxical hypertrichosis is not limited to the face. The face gets the most attention because it's visible and it's definitely emotionally charged. But we also see paradoxical regrowth on upper arms, on shoulders, on abdomen, on upper back. I've done plenty of electrolysis work on those areas after stimulation. That's particularly in hormonally responsive clients. So we kind of have to have the trifecta. So it's not about a single body part. It's about more tissue type. It's about follicle sensitivity. It's about repeated stimulation in one area. So that area has to be biologically primed to respond first and foremost.
Yeah. And often, and when I say often, I'm a person, I don't do well in like always and never. Okay. Usually I will find my caveat in the conversation, especially as a teacher. I don't know about you, but like the frequency, like, can I always do this? Does this always happen? I'm like, no, it doesn't always happen, but you want an always. And I'm going to tell you how it happens often. Okay. And why that happens. But it's like, part of this is like the unexpected increase, okay, that we're talking about there, are hairs that honestly should have never have had that laser hair removal in the first place because they weren't meant to, right? And so laser protocols are designed for specific profiles. And when technicians and or patients push off that profile, they push the limits of what is acceptable and what can happen there. So like when they go off script, right? Treating is fine, but like mixed hormonally driven hairs, and these are usually the patients that are coming in this space. And often they're patients that also have brown peach fuzz because tan skin gets tan peach fuzz. It's very rare that your hair color goes opposite until you lose that nutrients there. But like you are already stimulating something that was brown enough for you to see, but it was supposed to be because your skin is also brown, right? And so when we think about that hormonally influenced hair, the clients that are already prone to having excess growth in those areas because of those hormones, but also like I think of my clients with hypertrichosis to begin with, it's peach fuzz. It's just a lot of visible peach fuzz. Those expectations can no longer align to the outcomes because they don't align anymore at all. They're like, you have taken one job and made it a completely different task at that point. So that is a big thing that we're facing here. Unexpected is not the right one. You should expect it if you are working on these hairs.
One of the biggest misconceptions in this profession is the idea that hair exists in just two clean categories. It's either a vellus hair or it's terminal. But in reality, hair exists on a continuum. So you do have fully terminal hair and you do have very fine vellus hair, but there's a wide range of intermediate forms in between. So this is especially true on the face and the neck, where multiple hair types can exist within the same small treatment area. So when clients say it's just peach fuzz, they're often describing what was already capable of becoming more prominent under the right conditions.
Oh, yeah. And that's where the idea that laser is activating where it's coming from, because laser is not creating this, but it does deliver heat, right? And heat is a biological signal that when the heat is insufficient to fully destroy the follicle, it can then increase the blood flow. And then that increasing of the blood flow, you also have an inflammatory response that happens in the space. Not unlike under treating with electrolysis in that space, you create just enough damage to create irritation. You're not doing anything to extract it. You're going to cause an issue in that same space. It interacts then with like hormonally sensitive tissue in this space, because especially like I think about all of our patients that gets a pH on their neck, right? Those hairs are what that laser eats for dinner if it's trying to like increase growth. It can see just enough to cause chaos. And that chaos is unfortunately that client's hair patterns. Over time, I would say that these follicles, if you continuously hit them like low, or hit them at all, you're going to create thicker, more pigmented hair. So it basically starts to increase the stem cells present in that area, starts to distort the follicle in that space, starts to elongate the follicle from a vellus hair to a terminal hair, giving it more structures within those stem cells in the area. And it's not like activation in like some magical sense. It's we're talking about biology here, and that biology is like, oh, you just gave me everything I need to grow better. And nothing I need to kill this hair.
So I'm going to introduce this next topic, but I think it's going to be important to talk a little bit about how laser works. We don't want to make a full episode about this because we've got lectures on them. But it's going to be important to understand how laser works, to understand how understimulation happens in laser. We'll
Yep.
talk about it also in terms of electrology, but it's really important to and it's really important to make a connection that often gets overlooked, even with electrology. Hair follicles are regenerative structures by design. When we apply energy that doesn't fully disable the germinative zone, the follicle doesn't just disappear. It will heal itself, it will adapt. And when that partial injury happens repeatedly, especially in hormonally responsive tissue, follicle behavior can change. And that's not unique to just laser.
No. Exactly. I mean, like electrologists, I see this often online where we're looking at those public forums and people are just kind of like spouting off levels. And unfortunately, they're spouting off levels with like no backstory or like what's your favorite filament type or your filament size, all that kind of stuff. And they're not really looking at like why we're choosing what we choose in this space. We can observe the same phenomena here on a smaller scale, right? Like if you think about it, like a laser's area of treatment is anywhere between the size of like your thumb. Like if it's a rectangular one, it's basically from where your thumb meets the rest of your hand to the end of the digit, right? On some of them, and some of them are more round, like a quarter size or a little bit larger than a quarter size. So if you think, how much damage can I do with one filament undertreated with electrolysis? I can still pluck out an entire face worth of hair. That's a
And
waste
some
of my
people do.
day. And some people do. And I'm like, that's not job retention, that's job maddening. Okay. But I can make a lot more damage in one pulse with my laser if I'm not paying attention. And by damage, I don't mean just burning somebody. I mean undertreating and causing excess growth in the space. If the working point is off, it's too shallow, it's insufficient timing, it's insufficient intensity. And when we say insufficient, we're not saying increase the time, increase the intensity. We're saying balance it out, find the balance, right? Which is why we always tell you guys, stop telling people you're cranking it up. They're going to wonder where it tops off at, right? Conservative energy, because you're trying not to make somebody be in pain, is also problematic because unfortunately there is a level of trauma that we cause to the skin and that sometimes can result in pain. If you consistently always use too small of a filament, okay, so you're not getting your target depth, conservative energy output. So all you're trying to do is like, yeah, you're being a little too conservative. And so you keep trying to like bring yourself up to your working point, but like never really getting to that spot. The follicle, it can survive, but it's trying to adapt and continue cycling because you're just not you're not hitting that bottom 2/3. Laser does the same thing. It does it on a larger scale. So electrolysis didn't cause more hair, but the follicle was repeatedly stimulated and without it being fully destroyed. And that's how you end up with this. Same thing with waxing, same thing with tweezing. We just focused on laser because that's where we had the most amount of data to focus on it in that moment. So that's a big thing that we have to think about.
There's a comment in the chat. So this is from Gabby. I've had a couple male clients that experienced it. Went from hairy to hairier on arms, chest, back, but visually they were ideal laser candidates starting point, which makes me wonder if the laser settings themselves were weak or old, or are they just outliers?
A little bit of both. Here's what's wild. Okay, so one, where did they experience excess? Because while they could be perfect candidates, if it's their upper arms, okay, and we still don't have, typically on our upper arms, it can't go thick to thicker unless it was thin to begin
It's
with.
still, very much mixed growth, right?
It's still mixed growth, right?
Intermediate, vellus, terminal, you've got the mixture. That's always the key to pH. It's that mixed
Yeah.
growth areas.
Yeah, and like what Robin says here, proper wavelength is often not the right choice. It's not, because the thing is just like your electrolysis machine. If you think about in timing and intensity, right? From going to flash to manual for thermolysis or galvanic. Okay, I'm going to use these two camps. Okay, if I'm bringing up my intensity, I am reducing my time, right? If I am bringing up my time, I am reducing my intensity because it is a balancing act. Okay, now it doesn't have to be like if I go up by 10, I go down by 10. Okay, but you are looking at what that target needs to do. That is what we are dealing with here, is that the target that we tried to go after was not targetable, not the right target. They didn't even select the right tool to get to the right depth in that space, just like we can with electrolysis. It's just how much of that can happen. Mm-hmm. So I think that like, you got to think about it. It's that repeated stimulation. And honestly, patients will see it before reality really sets in because they're hyper focused on it. But what they're really seeing is that you shaved the hairs over the area to target underneath the skin. Okay. And I'm going to do this in two parts. Okay. So you shave the area. Joanie just talked about how we don't like dermaplaning for peach fuzz. Okay. Why? Because you get rid of everything. Now your tapered edge is now a blunt edge, and it's the thicker portion of that hair, right? So that has to breach the surface, and it's going to feel prickly even with peach fuzz. Okay. So not fun. And it kind of puts you in the cycle that unless you're willing to let everything shed back out and come back around, you're there. Right? So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is when we think of places that don't shave the surface of the skin, okay, my light of a laser can only go so far. Okay. That depth is predetermined by what I'm setting up the parameters, but it is set based on the wavelength that I'm working with. Okay. So places that don't shave, because they want to make sure they don't miss anything for you. Okay. I should be able to see your hair color underneath your skin shaved for my laser to be able to then treat it. Mm-hmm. Full stop. That's the first part. So I need it shaved because if my hair is above the surface of the skin, if I laser this, while as great as the head hair looks, that is dead matter. Okay. Out here, we are not growing. In here we are, right? And so you just went and put my target above the surface of my skin, nowhere near what makes my dead matter grow, right? So the health of my hair, I'm still growing a hair, but this is not what is the target, right? It's interior. And so those are the two biggest things that happen in the laser world. Whenever I see people fire upon a laser, that they have not shaved the area, they've moved their target to the surface of their skin, not the depth of the follicle. And two, did they match it to what the needs were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why the work is never about rigid settings or one size fits all rules. It's about finding the correct working point for the hair that's in front of us at that moment in time. I talked a lot when I was lecturing in Australia, and I was talking about micro decisions. Electrologists make micro decisions on pretty much follicle to follicle. You shift a little bit. The micro decision could be the depth. It could be 2 pulses versus 1. It could be that you're changing the probe, the setting, whatever it is. We make all of these tiny little decisions, and thankfully, because we work hair by hair, our effect isn't as widespread as lasers is. And so if you mess up on one follicle, it doesn't really affect the follicles that are around it. So those can still be treated properly. With laser, if you mess up on that balance that you're talking about, then it's more widespread, and so we tend to see more issues in the end.
Absolutely.
This season, Electrolysis Unplugged is spotlighting our groundbreaking research project. We're working to bring legitimacy, data, and recognition back to electrology. If you're a practitioner ready to contribute detailed charting and client outcomes, or a student interested in learning the process, visit electrologycoalition.com, look under research, and get involved today. Together, we're writing the future of electrolysis.
When we balance effectively, it takes time to really truly understand an area, and if we do it right, we'll gain control over the long-term timeline, which is really what we're looking for. That's how we prevent prolonged treatment courses. That's why we avoid unnecessary stimulation. In other words, outcomes are shaped over time, not in a single session. So we have to look at the big picture.
Before we go on to like our next set of notes, I want to just be able, Joanie, I know I sent it into the chat. Will you pull up that piece of picture? That picture, there's not a piece of picture, it's a digital one, and show the crowd at here. And listenings, like if later on you listen to this and you're like, what is Stephanie talking about? I actually put this up on a lot of my socials too, because sometimes when I'm teaching the public about this, it's actually the easiest tool for the public to understand, not just for electrologists to understand.
Yes, let me get.
And I will say, sorry, there's a lot of, I will also say, this conversation, if you're like, what the heck is Stephanie talking about? I have a whole laser and electrolysis talk that I did last year. Additionally, I'm really excited about this. We have Robin coming out this year to talk laser and electrolysis.
At AES, yeah.
At AES this year. And so this is going to be a conversation that we can really open up a deeper dialogue to. It's not so much like it is so much more than a 1-hour episode of a podcast. This is like an entire theory course. And when I talk to other laser technicians and they have not understood the difference between electrolysis and laser, this is like what I have to teach them in this moment. So laser, a true laser, not an IPL, is a collimated beam. Okay. So when we think of that light, you have a couple different things that you have to consider here. So the collimated beam, and I'm going to focus laser before I focus IPL. If it is ideally able to target the whole area, its depth is equal to the insertion point of a terminal hair on a size 4 to 5 filament, okay, into a size 4 to 5 hair, okay? That is your standard. That depth is exactly why we need the area shaved, because if we go here, so can you see my mouse going back and forth or no?
No.
So at the surface layer of the skin, that is exactly why I would shave that area prior to lasering it, because I want that beam's depth, because it's set in stone based off of what I put in, like my distance gauge and my surface area and my wavelength. These parameters are set in there. And I can only go that depth because that's what it's built to do, right? And so if I bring it up, then I'm doing photorejuvenation. If I put it to the surface of the skin, I'm targeting hair, okay? That's the bigger difference between the two. So if you have a collimated beam, that target should be, as long as the hair can be seen, the easiest, truest way to get to permanent hair reduction and removal if the target is acquired on a patient. This is also why we can't call it permanent hair removal, because I am putting these words very distinctly separated, that you have to hit these milestones for it to be permanent, which is why I have not shaved my legs since I was 16, because my legs was literally blue when I would shave them, okay? Thick, ample amounts of hair, and I had not stopped, like my fluctuations and growth patterns had shifted basically at 14 and hadn't moved. So I had 2 years without any change of hair growth patterns at that point, okay? So I was primed for it because everything was present, everything was terminal, everything was dark. The only thing that wasn't was I had to go with a different wavelength because of my skin color, okay? So an alexandrite for me would be less effective than it, say, for example, an ND-YAG, because the ND-YAG is meant for someone that has darker melanin, even if it's inactive right now. And at that time, it wasn't. I was a swim kid, right? So even with that, I had to counter for that to protect my melanin, okay? That being said, you have gauges of depth that you can also change the laser to. So even within that range, a vellus hair should never have, and when I'm saying these numbers, you guys are going to laugh at me because you're going to be like, Stephanie, I'm not a laser technician. A vellus hair does not need an 18 millimeter or 24 millimeter spot size. Why is that? Because the depth of my millimeter is the diameter down here of that distance gauge. So if I have a circular gauge that's 18 millimeters, then my depth is 9 millimeters into the surface of the skin, okay? Which means if I had something at 8 millimeters, I am now at 4 millimeters into the skin, which is a vast difference between those two targets. What ends up happening is you go to a chop shop or somebody's pushing the envelope and they're trying to just test out new things. They're using larger spot sizes, changing their depth and moving it past your target point. So it's like trying to go for a size 2 hair with a size 5 filament. Like,
and inserting all the way.
Yes. Yeah. and puncturing through, like you have a perforation, a puncture in the base of that and being like, I treated this. No, you didn't. You just injured them. That's all you did. You stimulated blood flow because you created an injury, right? But that's all it is. So I would say that
Question here from Michaela. So are you saying as laser treatments progress, we should use a smaller spot size and not necessarily higher joules?
correct. A smaller spot size will actually equate to higher joules because as you pull in your surface
Concentration.
area, your concentration, you can actually use higher joules in that space. Hold on a second. I'm gonna mute myself first. In a moment here, my laser teacher is actually in the building and she's like, she was raising her hand. I'm like, wait, because I will be off topic. But yes, I mean, so as I pull in my target, my joules do increase, but my joules don't, oh my gosh, side quest. Your joules don't increase.
Yeah,
over
this was not supposed to be
Yeah.
a laser course tonight.
No. The other thing is like your joules don't, like when your clients are like, oh, they keep raising the joules every time I go in because I have.
When I got laser, that's what it was. When it was towards the session 4 or 5, I remember I was sweating so much when I got up that paper, it was just like crumbs all over my back, you know?
Yeah, I'd rather you sweat at the start of treatment than the end of your treatment because I want to target all the hairs. And so if I go and conservatively treat you across the board on any modality and underdo it, I just made my work.
You know,
twice
it's funny because it sounds like, just like electrolysis, it's all about precision.
Yes.
Except that we're not doing it manually with the insertion of a probe,
No.
finding our right target, but we're using a laser beam and where, essentially where it congregates under the skin. And that needs to be where that target area is.
Yep.
So really, it's sure. I mean, there's less skill associated with laser, but the understanding has to be there no matter what you do.
Yeah, and really the less skill in the laser part is just, and this is why you'll always.
It's just because, I mean, the insertion part is what I'm referring to,
But even then, there's less skill because in laser school, they teach you how to fire a laser safely.
Yeah.
And they teach you the basic components of your growth cycle, but I feel like
they need to go deeper for sure.
Yeah. The greatest the greatest laser technician is an electrologist that learned about the hair follicle first and then got to be a stellar laser technician because you already know what kills and grows a hair. Where a laser technician then understands how to then treat the epidermis so that they can do so in a way that then protects your skin at the same time. Yep. Facts.
We have a fax with 2 exclamation marks coming from one of our listeners here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. So we're kind of on the discussion of laser versus electrolysis. So let's kind of keep that going a little bit.
So let's talk about going in from the laser versus electrolysis, and you can totally close down the screen now. I just wanted them to be able to see what I mean by that reduction of that spot size and how it pulls up to the surface, okay? Because the face is particularly vulnerable because it is checking several risk boxes at once. So are the upper arms, so are the sides of the abdomen, okay? Upper back and lower back, especially on those assigned female at birth, or those that did not have extensive terminal growth in those spaces, because they're all things that happen when you have hirsutism kick up too, okay? So it's very sensitive. It is mixed types of hair. It is highly vascular, okay? The lower face and the neck area in this space, in particular, they are heavily influenced by androgens. And androgens are those little hormones that are responsible for hair growth. And so if you really think about it, it makes the follicle more responsive to stimulus. And so when laser parameters or electrolysis parameters are, let's say laser in the space, they're designed for body areas, okay? Not
deep follicles, yeah.
Deep follicles. So these are your lower legs, inner thigh, okay? This is your bikini line, your Brazilian, your underarms. Beard style facial hair initially, not because of, for example, a PCOS patient that has max amount of growth on their face, that has male pattern beard growth. I'm not just talking a lot of accelerated vellus hair. I am talking about the volume as well. They are still a better candidate for laser initially than you would realize because you can't stimulate anything more, okay? But that is the bigger thing here. So when we think about like the body areas are applied to the face without that, I would say, appropriate adjustment in the space, the risk of unintended outcomes then increases significantly.
And then when you add like endocrine conditions like PCOS, insulin resistance, thyroid imbalances, it
Yeah.
really makes these cases even more complex. These clients, they have follicles that are biologically, that's the
Mhm.
word, biologically primed to change over time. So these are not going to be steady. Laser doesn't introduce that tendency. It's already there. It simply interacts with it in a way that accelerates it or reveals it.
And I feel like that's also like the way when you're doing a consultation with a client and you're like, hey, this area is a hormonally sensitive area. If you have the propensity to grow hair now, I can get what's here and now, but I want you to understand that there are going to be possible times in your life that those fluctuations may introduce new hair. Does that mean that your electrolysis didn't work? No, the hairs I killed are dead, right? But it's the inactive follicles that become activated. Laser is an excellent tool when used appropriately, right? And it's designed for bulk reduction of coarse, pigmented hair in areas with low hormonal influence. Even if you think about your legs are a slightly hormonal influence because even though pre-puberty you have leg hair, it does shift a lot during puberty. Same thing with your forearms. That's why those two areas are weirdly borderline sometimes if you get them too soon. And I would say that, like, if we think about like electrolysis being on the other hand, like, so we have this pigmented hairs on the laser side, the low hormonal influence. Electrolysis is designed for precision. That is what makes us uniquely qualified to be like incredibly good at hair killing is like we work to not only getting into a follicle, but finding the follicle depth and being able to probe that and feel that. You can't do that with a light source in that space. That precision kicks off like new levels of kill rate right there. And so it treats the follicles individually. It doesn't rely on the pigment in that space. It doesn't rely on thermal diffusion in that space. I mean, it does rely on thermal destruction, but not through photo. It's through physical, through that friction. And so that's the bigger part of it. So I would say the distinction becomes like critically important in areas where the hair behavior is inconsistent or hormonally driven. And that's
And many of the clients that we see with electrolysis are not technically failed laser clients. They're just clients who really were never ideal laser candidates to begin with. Electrolysis, it's not a backup plan, but it should be the correct modality for certain hair types. Understanding that will allow us to practice ethically and communicate honestly. Honestly, if the laser techs could kind of, at least understand where and when they should recommend other modalities, I think we probably wouldn't see much paradoxical hypertrichosis happening anymore.
no. I mean, so like my perfect world, okay, I'm like going to slow down and really think about this. My perfect world of a technician, whether or not they can perform it. Like, so I'm not saying you have to go buy a laser, okay? But I think that at minimum, both laser hair removal technicians and electrologists should be sitting through theory that encompasses both understanding. Because how many people do we have on the call today? Like we have 12 of us here. It's 14 if you include us, right? So there are 12 people here with vastly different bodies, right? We have a different reality to like what we want to do in our treatment rooms. We have different financial backings. We have different reasons to why we may or may not want to include something. But if you sit down in any consultation and someone asks you about electrolysis, how many of you, and I just want you to think for a second to yourselves, also get asked about laser? Because I think that is the amount of electrologists I know that like, oh, people always ask me about it, but I can't do it, right? And so they then circle back to it doesn't work, it's this, it's that, right? And so I think that like when we start really thinking about the struggle, that we face as technicians, it's because lack of education or lack of access to the things that we should be the one wielding aren't happening, right? Like Joanie is also laser trained, but she's in California and she can't do laser, right? That is for doctors and nurses. Well, those doctors and nurses don't have to sit in a hair removal program. They literally sit in a day.
1 day, 2 day. Yeah. 2 days, they're lucky.
Yeah. Honestly, most of them are a day training. They sit in a day training.
Yeah.
They get that little checkbox signed off and then they can fire that laser. They have no idea what they're doing in those hairs. They do know how to do a safe treatment though. And so I think that as you sit there and go, okay, what would Stephanie do? Well, Stephanie would make sure that you guys are duly trained, not in practical application, but the understanding so that you can do a better.
I think that it's super important for us to know how lasers work, even if you can't do it in your state, because you will have so many clients that come through asking about laser, having gotten laser before, and you need to be able to understand how it works in order to advise them properly, honestly, and to really be able to address whatever situation is on your treatment bed.
It's kind of crazy because I still have my laser because I plan on bringing laser back into the school. That's why I'm going the additional routes of being able to get additional training stuff for myself and yada, yada. But I think that I still have all my theory and that'll be the moment I can release that side of things. It's like, I am going to make sure every one of my electrology students also has more than a chapter on this because I want them out there speaking truth into this and realities of what's at the end of our filament and what's at the end of that laser beam versus this information chaos. Because like when we went to a W path and the doctor was like, oh, like literally in the middle of it discrediting our work here. And I'm like, wait a second. I had to cut him off because he was talking down to you. And I'm like, we are both laser technicians. Like, we're not saying that what you're saying is bad. We're saying, how can we better serve your patient to ensure that their skin is like healthier, right? And that's what's happening is we have people that don't understand the importance of how to kill a follicle. And they just say, well, I have a DO, DMD, NP, and I'm the best fit to run this thing. And I'm like, no, you're not. And you're not because you're not trained in it. So that's my soapbox. That's my perfect world. Okay, let's circle back because I had to say it so that people understood that's very important to my brain cells.
So let's go back to the original question and answer it directly. Okay, now that we've unpacked all of this context. So the question was, can paradoxical hypertrichosis happen only on the face? Does it only occur if the client already had peach fuzz? And does laser activate peach fuzz into terminal hair? So again, the answer is kind of no, and not in the way people think. Paradoxical hypertrichosis is not limited to the face, although the face and neck are definitely at higher risk because they tend to be more hormonally sensitive. They're highly vascular, and it contains mixed hair types. It can occur and does occur on other hormonally responsive areas on the body as well.
Yes. Yeah, and it doesn't require peach fuzz. And I would recommend each one of you, when you're doing your consultations, to remind clients that hair is kind of a scale of density. And we don't have to say, it's 3 hairs. We say vellus, extended vellus, terminal, right? But they have to understand what that means and kind of like show them with a picture in that space. Hair exists in a continuum, right? So many follicles appear fine or insignificant, are still biologically active and capable of changing under the right conditions. Okay, so just because it's peach fuzz to that person does not mean that it cannot become problematic. The risk is not about how light the hair looks. It is about how responsive that follicle is to hormones and stimulation in that space. Because if it can't see it at all, especially in my blondies, I can go over all your peach fuzz and typically not stimulate growth.
Yeah, there's no absorption. There's no issue.
No absorption. It's a white roof on a house versus a black roof on a house. I'm bouncing off that sun all day long. Nothing's getting hot inside. Okay. So I would say that finally, like we would think about this, laser does not activate a hair, or it can activate the change of a hair, okay? But it doesn't make new ones. Like those follicles existed, they were inactive, right? Or unable to be seen. We created the right stimulation for them to become active and seen. So if the follicle is dealing with stimulation, right? That sub-therapeutic laser energy interacts with those hormonally sensitive follicles in a way that changes how they express over time. And that's adaptation, not activation. So your body is saying, hey, you've told me that I have to do something different here. And so I'm adapting to what will let me survive.
That's right. So, why does this topic keep coming up? One of the reasons is because it exposes a deeper issue in how hair removal is taught and how it's marketed. We kind of touched a little bit on this. Clients often are given simplified promises, right? Reduction, permanence, progress, and without being taught how the hair actually behaves over time. When results don't follow a straight line, that's when they get confused. And from the provider side, many providers are trained on devices, parameters, and protocols, but not really enough on follicular biology, on endocrine influence. And that gap really makes it much harder for them to recognize the risk.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important to say this out loud. Like paradoxical hypertrichosis feels threatening to the narrative of certainty that clients are often sold. Hair removal is marketed as linear, which is wild because it's cyclical, right? You start here, you end there, but biologically, like the hair growth is anything but linear. So when we don't prepare clients for the reality that they're about to face, they assume something went wrong rather than something complex occurred. This is why electrologists end up doing so much emotional labor in this space, because we're often the first professionals to slow the conversation down, because everything that we do is about precision and skill and slowing ourselves down. We're not looking for the speed treatment. We're looking for the precision treatment, right? I think that it also is one of the places where, like, when something wrong has happened, they're like, well, now what? We're the last line of defense because we are the truest form of permanent.
Mhm.
And so in that thought process, it's like they're like, well, I resulted to the person that I waited to go to.
Yeah. Everybody wants a shortcut. I get it. It's definitely going to, and when they're promised, a 20-minute session cleared their whole entire face and they're good to go, and they come and see us and we're like, it's going to take 2 hours every single week. I mean, obviously, I understand.
Yeah. But trust. I often because sometimes I have the strigan on the hairs that come on my chin and that kind of stuff now that I'm hitting that time in my life. And I had a lot of electrolysis early on. I don't know if I want to sit on the electrolysis table for more than a few stray hairs, right? But I wouldn't sit on the laser table now, because if I were to even go after that accelerated vellus hair that exists on my face that is very fine to the naked eye, most people never see it. It is only me because I'm trained to look at the hair. And maybe my students, when they're staring at me being like, do you have hair? That are really noticing it. I think that it's just important for people to understand you have hurdles that you're up against that don't mean that you did something wrong. It means that we have to go back and say, okay, I'm going to slow this down. I'm not going to talk bad about what happened, but I am going to explain the biology of what happened to you so that you understand how it doesn't happen in a new area. If you wanted to have laser on your legs, like I did, you can, right? But I'm not going to go and do laser on my face, right? Because I don't have the target. And so you find out how to make it work.
Coming soon in 2026, the AES Spring and Summer Seminar, plus more virtual CU events to keep you inspired, educated, and connected. Brought to you by Joanie Gonella and Stephanie Shields of the Electrology Education Coalition. Stay tuned and get all updates at electrologycoalition.com.
And that kind of brings us to the second topic, which is, understanding the early warning signs. So as a laser technician, it rarely comes out of nowhere. So there's usually some indicators along the way. One of the biggest ones is that hair appears darker and more widespread between sessions rather than reduced. Another one is that the hair is showing up in adjacent untreated areas. And when you dismiss these as like, oh, the hair's shedding out or just a temporary flare up, that's when you kind of miss that opportunity to reassess and adjust.
Yeah. So when that adjustment part happens, it's like I feel like the red flag that then we have to pay attention to is treatment frequency. So an uptick in your clients want to come in. Okay. So I put you at a 6-week interval and all of a sudden they're like, I have hair at 4 weeks and it's substantial. Okay. You just told me there's a lot of blood flow happening there, right? You should always see a downward trend in between your appointments. You shouldn't start off with like long periods of time at the start of your sessions. That should be at the end so that we can see what your return rates look like. I think the treatment frequency is the big one. More sessions don't mean better results. That's also why I have a lot of patients like, can I come every 4 weeks? No, you can't. Even if my laser technician has the availability, no, because your hair is not going to be there. So we're doing something that doesn't need to be. If there's hair present, then somebody messed up on like the targeting or somebody messed up on boundary setting. Because sometimes clients come in, they're like, I don't care. I don't want electrolysis. Just do it. I can put up with this growth, right? But pay attention to where they're asking for it because those hormonally responsive tissue areas are going to be your first lines of noticing increased growth. There's a moment when practitioners should pause and ask, like, is the hair actually a really good candidate for the modality that's in front of them? Too often, the answer is kind of more of an assumption rather than like a reassessment of this. Recognizing those patterns early, I think, will help you make sure that your clients don't fall into that as well. So if they're going back and forth between your table and a laser table, which I do all the time, that's most of my patients go back and forth between mine and my laser technician schedule. And the reason that we do that is so that we can get them to the process on the stuff that I don't have the time to get to yet, but they can get the volume out. But if you're talking back and forth the laser technician and watching those trends, take pictures when you see grow out that looks suspicious, like it looks like more. Technicians, be honest when you're seeing it. Hey, I'm noticing a little bit of increased growth in that area that I was talking about before. I want to keep an eye on this. I'm going to take some photo documentation today. And the next time you come in, I don't want you to shave these areas. I actually want to be able to shave when you come in so that we can then see and track that. If you aren't a laser technician, then I would say for your patient, take those photos of the areas that they're having laser done in and be like, these are the ones I want you to show your technician, because if they go into their laser session shaved, their technician's never seeing that, especially if they were borderline. So once you realize that if the person was a good like hair candidate, then it's like these patterns will allow you to allow your patient to get to their result faster because you stopped when it was small, not when it became the big problem, and had to really reverse it. It's not always an easy system to build around, but I would say that like protocols should be in place for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We can definitely also talk about the emotional side for clients. So somebody that had issues, you know, it can be a huge emotional impact to have, you know, when you have clients with paradoxical hypertrichosis. For many people, especially women dealing with facial hair, hair growth is tied to identity, to confidence, and even to shame. So when they seek treatment, they're often already vulnerable. And then if they're experiencing increased hair growth after laser, it can be devastating. So we're not just talking about, you know, oh, that's disappointing, that didn't work. No, I'm talking about like it's borderline traumatizing. So that emotional weight doesn't always show up in clinical description, but it definitely shows up in your electrolysis consult rooms. We hear all about it.
Oh my God. Language in this space is going to matter so much. When clients feel like their experience is not being taken seriously, we're minimizing it, we're not, or maybe explaining it, or even amping them up with our own frustration that we see as technicians out there. Because that's the other
our
part
baggage about our frustrations with the laser techs, and we're just, you know.
Yeah. And it's like, we can have baggage with the techs, but the technology isn't the culprit.
No.
The technology is what it is, but the
And laser can be done well, and it is often done very well in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, I just think back to like my long years of doing this, and I have a lot of success rates in there, but I also have had people along that journey that they'll pop into my schedule and I'm like, who did this? Like, it's frustrating. It's, clients need validation. Yes, I'm really sorry this happened to you. There are some great ways that we can get this taken care of. It's not a mistake was made. A decision was made in that space, and that decision resulted in this. It's not like the technician undertreated by accident, right? And that caused the paradoxical hypertrichosis. It's that something was off balance and somebody didn't see it, right? Or somebody pushed past that. And so I think that once they realize that the experience was real, it's understandable, that they have the validation, like, hey, this really sucks. I'm really sorry that happened to you. We can start to help them understand what pH is as a biological response, rather than a failure or a fluke. Because that's the other thing, is it's not a fluke. pH is not a fluke. It is
It's a real side effect. Yeah.
Real
It's a
side
real side
effect.
effect.
And it's really
and it's
avoidable.
common. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's avoidable.
Yeah.
And that's what's frustrating, is like, usually it's somebody like pushing past because of their own own bad feeling that they have for their patient, being like, oh my God, I understand it. I hated having my own hair. This worked really well for me, but they're not thinking about their hair versus the client's hair. And then they do something that was a mistake, in the sense of like, not mistake, they do something as a choice because they're reflecting on their own journey in that space. It helps clients start to understand that, like, we have problem solving ahead, not blame shifting. Because the blame that we have here is, I don't want to call it accidental, it's unintentional, because we just didn't understand what happened. And so now we have a problem to solve. That shift often allows them to move forward in treatments rather than feeling stuck and feeling devastated. Because as somebody that had an unwanted facial hair pattern, it does feel devastating. In fact, like when I do my upcoming history lecture, I talk about like the earlier portions of civilization, and when we started making this something that was more about beauty, right? And less about like functionality. It was a virtue signal, right? It's like, when my skin looks better, I'm more feminine. When I have less of this hair, I'm more virtue. Like it is a virtue thing that initially started off as a functional thing. And then we moved into the cosmetic component of it. It allows people to understand that you're not unusual for having hair. Society's vision of this and what can happen when biology goes awry because something was done incorrectly or with lack of education is what happened. And it makes them feel less alone.
And so for the profession, on a professional level, paradoxical hypertrichosis forces us to really confront some uncomfortable truths about how hair removal services are positioned.
Mm-hmm.
If we want electrology and hair removal to be taken seriously as health-adjacent services, we have to be willing to talk about limitations, to talk about risks and nuances. Glossing over paradoxical hypertrichosis outcomes may make marketing easier. Obviously, if you sell that it's for everybody and everybody can do it, then obviously you're going to be selling way more. But it undermines the long-term credibility. So people are going to turn against laser if this isn't addressed properly. So transparency, I think, is huge in any field. And even when it's uncomfortable, it's what really builds your professional legitimacy.
Literally tomorrow, you guys, I have to log into my TikTok and go into my other folder. I have five questions from the public about pH that I have to answer the videos on. So you guys are going to see a flood of these because this is where we play a critical role, right? When you have the power as an electrologist, especially if you have the understanding of what's happened here, we're not just treatment providers anymore. We are educators. We are educators of our patients' care. And I used to tell people, oh yeah, I got into teaching in electrology about 5 years into my practice is when I started to lean into the teaching. I got into teaching in electrology when I was doing consultations for my mom as a 16-year-old at transgender hair removal conferences, saying, this is what we can do for you. And I wasn't even a technician. You start off in the world of electrology as an educator because you're educating the public on how you can serve them in that space, which is why those little elevator speeches are important. Many clients only learn about our profession because paradoxical hypertrichosis happened to them. And now they're desperate to figure out how it doesn't. Ideally, I would love them to learn about us during like our collaborative sides between laser and electrolysis during consultation, right? For me to be like, I will take care of all of this. Can you please off-source all of this bulk hair removal to my favorite laser technician so they can make you as hairless as possible so I can do the cleanup work? Then I get to serve more people, right? We can help them make informed choices, which then goes into like, I was just talking to my students today, informed consent goes into there because now they have the information and this is what informed consent is in that spot. So we elevate our entire profession when we do that because now we're speaking about the facts of like what is happening in your treatment room and in the treatment rooms of laser. And we show that hair removal isn't about like selling certainty. It's about navigating biology responsibly. And that is so dope, to be honest.
And, this conversation ultimately, like you said, comes down to informed consent. Clients deserve to know when they're at higher risk for paradoxical outcomes. They deserve explanations that are rooted in biology and not blame or oversimplification. When pH happens, our role is not to shame past decisions. It's to explain what's happening, to provide clear science-based path forward. So we need to be able to assess the situation, explain why it happened, and then give them a solution. And we do have the solution because we know that electrolysis works.
Yeah, absolutely. When we do that well, I would say that it's not just about correcting hair growth. We're going to be rebuilding trust. And right now, especially with all of us, like we're working really hard in our state to get licensed. And it's like we can rebuild trust because the path has been set in front about how well we can do this. Trust allows clients to move forward realistically, talk excitedly about the progress that they had, and stop feeling confused or even blaming themselves for what happened. It's just science, and we're going to take care of the science experiment from here.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll do it right. Yep.
We're going to do it right. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you.
It's nice to have all of you back after last
right.
week.
After your last week, all by your lonesome.
Oh, poor Barbara. But it's nice to have you guys here. We have next month, February
15th.
15th. Are you guys going to spend some post-Valentine's Day with your favorite little Zap Master over here? And we're going to talk about the history of hair removal into like the modern spaces. So if you haven't signed up for that education event, we just launched.
Yeah, it's going to be live pretty soon. I will be sending out the discount code for mentorship hour, people. So don't buy it just yet. Wait for the email with the code because you do get the 10% off. And that's one of the perks of you doing this with us. So another thing that's going to be launched pretty soon is going to be the official sign up for the Advanced Electrology Seminar. So that's going to be our 3, possibly 4-day event if you join the spa day with us. So that's going to be coming out pretty soon too. It's just we're tidying up some things. So watch your inboxes. Some good things will be coming. You will also get the 10% off for that event also. And there's also a early bird discount. So you can get quite a steep discount, honestly, on the whole event if you choose to come. So I'm excited.
We got some deals upon deals because I'm excited to have the workshop back. Vegas was fun. Don't get me wrong, because I actually really enjoyed having the beauty show too. But I love our workshop time. But I also am very excited for the spa.
Yeah, go play in the mud.
I will be.
It's natural hot springs, by the way, and so you have the tubs that smell like rotten eggs, and then they have the clay pits where you can kind of grease yourself up and massages and all these different things. And so it's a fun day. You can have just Mai Tais by the pool, whatever you want to do. June's a good time to come to California. So
I'm very excited. I'm just everybody knows. Very excited. So, all right. Well, I guess that's it for tonight, right?
Yep. That's it.
We made it. We're back.
That's right.
Have a great night, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Before we close out today, we want to acknowledge that conversations like this can feel heavy, especially for practitioners trying to do right by their clients, and for clients who feel frustrated when the outcomes don't match the expectations.
What we hope you take away from this episode is not a set of rigid rules, but a clear framework for understanding hair behavior. When we recognize follicles as a living, responsive structure influenced by hormones, tissue environment, and repeated stimulation, we make better decisions about consultations, modality selection, and treatment planning. That understanding allows us to guide clients honestly, without blame, and with realistic expectations.
These are not easy conversations, but they are necessary ones if we want to raise the standard of care in electrology and hair removal as a whole.
As always, we invite you to send us your questions, the ones you hear in the treatment room, the ones you're unsure how to answer, and the ones that challenge long-held assumptions. These questions shape these episodes and move the profession forward.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
This has been Electrolysis Unplugged, and we'll see you next time.